Okay.
We saw some of my bits. It's been a weird time in my life. I guess this all started, you could say, when me and my baby went to the park. I tried to feed the crows. I tried to make friends with a bunch of crows. I wanted to make a little army, a little murder, all on my own. Pester my enemies into a Hitchcockian early grave. Ferry my messages, that kind of sensible shit. It all went too far though. I tried to feed them, and then I tried to name them. There were 3 of them. To my shame, I was like, I'm gonna call you Russell, I'm gonna call you Cheryl, and then to the biggest and the blackest of the 3, I was like, I'm gonna call you Jim. And then Jim went, ah, racist! And I was like, yeah, that's fair. Because it kind of was. And then Jim said something else, which I wasn't expecting, which was anything at all, but specifically, he went, ah, productive and sloppy with the puns! And I was like, oh, fuck you, Jim. Like, I will take racist, because it kind of was, but sloppy and reductive with the puns, I'll have you know, you little feathery bastard, that I go to sleep every night dreaming of an A to Z of Susan Sarandon puns. And just a real quick aside, if you don't know who Susan Sarandon is, she's Louise in Thelma and Louise, or Janet in Rocky Horror, damn it. And either way, then Jim turned around to me and was like, oh, Susan Sarandon, I know her. I was like, do you fuck? How do you know her? And he's like, well, get a load of this, right? Way back in the Wayback Machine of the mid-90s. I was like, oh, the mid-90s? You're going to tell me about the mid-90s? I remember it very well. Gary Barlow was fat, but he was in a mesh vest and dancing around the bin fire like it was the best. Yeah, tell me more, Jim. And he's like, yeah, well, get a load of this. I had this job selling souls that are damned to the afterlife. And I was like, ha, goth behaviour. And he's like, yeah. But I was on the roof of the Art Quiggins, right? And I was just by the attic window. And not that I want to put my beak in where it's not wanted, but I had to look in there and guess who was in there. And I was like, go on, who? And it was like Susan Sarandon and Gina Davies. Thelma and Louise were both in there. I was like, go on, bullshit, what were they doing? He was like, well, we popped open a little bit of the bubbly. I was like, a bit of booze and Sarandon. Get behind this. He's right. Pause. You may have groaned at that pun. By the time I am done with this bit, you will be clinging to these puns like they're a goddamn life raft. And then, Jim says, after the champagne and the bit of booze and Sarandon, they popped out the essential oils and she started giving Thelma a rub down. I was like, oh, bit of my Susan Sarandon. You will like that one. But yeah. And then they started making out and taking the clothes off. I was like, stop. Don't tell me about the Rudy Sarandon, that's none of my business. He's like, no, I'm setting the scene. Because then, guess who turned up? And I was like, how could I possibly? But I'll bet you they looked exactly like Reginald D. Hunter, the bad guy from 24 season 1 specifically, and all bottle fingers out to the Warriors. And then Jim was like, correct! Like that, because I'm proper boss at guessing. And he was like, stop patting yourself on the back though, because these people weren't here for a good time, they were here for a bad time, because what they did was they shot them, and then they stabbed them, and then they threw them out the window. And I was like, they threw them out the window with the old Quiggins. They threw them Sarandon. Disgusting. And he went, yeah, but then splat dead. And I was like, oh no, tell me she's just snoozing Sarandon. No, dead. I was like, oh, don't worry about it. Cut to 1 year later, right? This trans kid comes rollerblading past, and I went, a trans kid came rollerblading past, and he went, yeah, trans kid comes rollerblading past, and I was like, yo, what's happening, Caitlyn Jenner? I was like, yeah, Caitlyn Jenner comes rollerblading past up to this cop who's played by Winston Zedmore from Ghostbusters, but he's a cop now, and she's having a bellyache to him about what happened to Susan Sarandon and Gina Davies, because it turns out they adopted her because problems with them. I'll tell you about them in a bit. But she's proper upset about it, and she's telling Winston Zedmore, and he's trying to like soothe her soul or whatever. But it's not working, and because she's still upset, and guess who's more upset? Old Susan Sarandon in the graveyard over the road. She's only pulled the G Susan Sarandon and popped up out of a grave only. Right, this is a bit weird. Her t-shirt's on back to front, and she's got, like, she's barefoot. And I was like, no shoes on Sarandon, gross. And he's like, yeah, but don't worry about it, right? Because I swooped in, flew in like that, and I was like, hey Susie, don't worry about it, girl. I got you covered, I'll take you back to your gaff. And he did. Jim, he was like, I'll talk back to her gaff at the old Quiggins, but it was now been turned into a crack den and that. And it was pissing down the whole way that they were walking back to the crack den. So she ended up flopping down on the couch in there, all piss wet throughs and Sarandon. And she finds her old wedding video, which is weirdly filmed in the exact same style as the end of the November Rain video by Guns N' Roses from the album User Illusion, Sarandon, Part 2. And then Susan, she starts righteously fuming Sarandon. She's really upset about what happened to her, so she smashes the place up. Finds a bunch of like face paints and stuff, so she drew on Sarandon, slapped a bit of rouge on Sarandon, and then looking a bit like Susan the sad clown, she fucks parkouring into the night. Parkouring. This is like a good 20 years before parkour was even popular. She's a pioneer, I'm telling you. But what she does, right, she goes looking for the people who wronged her, the people who hurt her and Gina Davies. And the first one that she finds is Reginald D. Hunter, the guy who looks like him. And he's like, in an alley. He's in an alleyway with this girl who looks suspiciously like Gina Davies, right? And he looks like he's about to do something terribly nefarious. And our Susan, she's not having it. She's refusing Sarandon. And what she does is a full Assassin's Creed jump. You've not seen Assassin's Creed, but this guy jumps off buildings dead high up and he goes, like that. And she does an Assassin's Creed jump off the top of the building into a dumpster, but then comes out with all the fighting spirit of Richard Nixon, but specifically the one from Futurama, all and Sarandon like that. And then Reginald D. Hunter's like, what the fuck did I do? And she's like, don't you act like you don't know what you did. And he's like, fuck this, and throws a knife at her. But she's like dodges it a little bit and only catches her slightly, slicing Sarandon. But she's got like this Wolverine like sort of healing factor, so it's just resealing Sarandon dead quick. And then she takes all Reginald D. Hunter's knives off him and then stabs him a bunch of times and then paints up a fucking great big bird on the wall and there's blood. And I was like, damn, a giant great big bird on the wall and there's blood, Jim. And Jim's like, yeah, what of it? And I was like, well, one, mad, but also two, kind of hard to make puns out of. Can you give me a little bit of a help? And he's like, well, I'd say it was like if this helps you, it's like 18th century post-expressionist. I'd say French in style. I was like, oh yes, Cézanne Sarandon. Yeah, I got highbrow puns. And he's like, yeah, but right, big bird on the wall and there's blood, dead weird. And Winston Zedmore, he's got to investigate this. And you know Winston Zedmore, the cop in this. Winston Zedmore, busting's what makes him feel good, not this. This gives him the willies, especially because he feels like he's being watched. And he is. By the bad guy from 24, season 1. That's right, Jack, we're watching you. And he doesn't want to watch forever, so he goes and tells his boss, who's the end of the show bad guy, right? And he's played by James Franco, but James Franco's wearing a share wig, and he's also not paying any attention because he's busy doing like this dark art ritual with his weird, for no reason, Asian sister. And I was like, watch out, Susan, the enemies are doing voodoo, Sarandon. And he's like, listen, bad guy from 24 season 1, I don't give a shit about none of this. How about you fuck off? And he's like, do you know what? I am going to fuck off. I'm going to go and deal some smack, because that's what I do in my spare time. And guess who I'm going to go and deal some smack to? And I was like, who? And he was like, Caitlyn Jenner's blonde, big, titty, goth, fat, smackhead mum. That's a lot of words. Caitlyn Jenner's blonde, big, titty, goth, fat, smackhead mum is a weird sentence for several reasons. Firstly, you don't get many fat smackheads. Secondly, you don't get many blonde goths. Certainly not in the mid-90s. Anyway, they're off doing smack, and guess who turns up? Boom! Sarandon from out of nowhere. And then, like, the bad guy from 24 is like, what the fuck is this? Because she's still face painted and for some reason still dripping wet. Like, it can't rain all the time, can it? I said to Jim, and Jim was like, spoilers, shut up! And then the bad guy from 24 season 1, he pulls out a piece, a little, and then shoots a wound in Sarandon, but the kind of wound that would kill a mortal man. Nah, Susan, no, because she's got to remember that like, she recovered from it, and then she took all the bad guy from 24 season 1's smack needles, because he was selling smack, and he stabbed them in the heart, and then pushed them, the plungers down, and then smack Bauer dead. Which is a long way to go just for that pun, but stay with me now, because then what she does is she looks at Caitlyn Jenner's blonde, big titty, goth, fat, smackhead mum, and at this point she's trying real hard to see what the inside of the back of her face looks like, just like that. And then Susan Sarandon walks over and she goes, FOD! And smacks her right in the FOD, right? And then immediately the lighting in the room gets 23% warmer, and then Caitlyn Jenner's blonde, big titty, goth, fat smackhead mum's eyes come back to front and centre, and all the smack starts pouring back out of her smack holes, and she looks up at her saviour, the still face painted, dripping wet, recovering the drug abuse and Sarandon, if you will. And then Caitlyn Jenner's blonde, big titty, goth, fat, recovered smackhead mum goes running boobly out. She goes, and then goes running boobily out of the room. Just in time for Winston Zedmore to burst boobily into the room and be like, freeze turkeys. And I was like, watch out, the boys in blues in Sarandon. And then Susan Sarandon's like, yeah, 1312's in Sarandon more. Like, fuck you, what are you doing here? And then he's like, hey, no, I've come to help, because here's what's happened. They've only gone and kidnapped Caitlyn Jenner. I know. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And then Susan Sarandon's like, you better tell me now. You better not be in with this better not be a trap that you're luring me into. And he's like, hey, who are you accusing, Sarandon? I'm on your side. I love that kid. But they've took her to the sweaty grunge rave over at the bombed out church. And then Susan Sarandon's like, oh, get in. I'm defo going straight there. Because Susan Sarandon's a big old fan of a bit of pale jam. Then so she goes, and just as she's like running off, Winston Zedmore's like, no, you got to be careful. He's got 72 Hasidic henchmen. And she's like, fuck this. I'll sort this dead quick. And she runs straight into the bombed out church, and she proper drop kicks the doors open, proper fully puts her shoes into it, puts her shoes in Sarandon, boots the doors open, grabs the first Hasidic henchman by the long and curlies and goes, oi, it's a fucking Saturday. What are you doing here? It's the Sabbath. And then she gave a sermon to the Jews in Sarandon, and everyone left peacefully. And that's how you do that, Joe. But then, because, by the way, this is the mid-90s, not the early 90s. Pale Jam, way too big for all of this shenanigans, so they immediately fuck off. And in the silence, right? In the silence, you just hear... No, don't know if you've ever seen The Warriors, but if you had, you'd known that this impression was coming way back in Act 1 when I hung it up on the wall like Chekhov's bottle fingers. Sarandon, come out to play! And it's all bottle fingers from the Warriors, but he's not alone. He's got James Franco in his Sherwick. He's got James Franco's weird Asian sister, and he's also got Caitlyn Jenner on the balcony for extra Top Goth vibes in the bombed out church. So Susan Sarandon's like, oh shit, what am I gonna do? And then Winston Zedmore bursts back in, and he's like, don't worry girl, I got you covered, and chucks her a piece, and she's like, sick, nice one. And she runs off up to the balcony. And while she's doing that, James Franco turns around to his weird Asian sister, and he's like, hey girl, bite that crow's head off. And she's like, yeah, got it. And she tries to grab Jim, and Jim's like, oh, fuck you, bitch. If pecking's your game, I got two right here for you, you little Ozzy Osbourne trying to be wannabe cunt. And then he poked both of her eyes out, pecked both of her eyes out, and she went, ah! And Wilhelmed her way off the balcony, which really upset James Franco in his Sherwig. So he pulled out a piece of his own and shot Winston Zedmore and booted him down a flight of stairs, which really upset Susan Sarandon. So she pulled out another piece of her own, a little pew-pews in Sarandon that she got off Winston Zedmore before. And then she shot bottle fingers in his bottle fingers, and then his dick, and then his face, with 3 bullets marked deny, defend, and depose. Shout out to my boy, the Luigi Sarangione. Frame. And then that really scared James Franco. It really scared the Sherwig. So they both ran off with Caitlyn Jenner to the attic, the roof even higher. They ran on the roof for extra Top Goth vibes. And Susan Sarandon, she's straight after him. She pursues him, Sarandon, onto the roof. And then, with nowhere left to go, James Franco in his Sherwig turns around and goes, okay, we've been at this a while. And if you figured out what movie I'm parodying here, go and watch it again, because I swear to God, it's the exact same shot for shot fight scene. Because James Franco Sherwig turns around to Susan Sarandon and goes, okay, let's just do the exact final fight scene from Beauty and the Beast, only I promise I'll be Gaston so I can die handsome and you can be the Beast. And then Susan Sarandon goes, how about fuck all of your illusions, Sarandon? I'm going to be Susinago Montoya because you killed my Thelma, so prepare to die. And with that, she pulled out a 6-fingered sword from behind her back, and then she fully runs and throughs and Sarandon, boots him off the roof, saves Caitlyn Jenner, and takes her back to a blonde, big titty goth, fat, recovered smackhead ma with the 23% warmer lighting and a big old fat stack of pancakes. And then just as the sun's coming back up, she gets back into her grave for one last little bit. Canoodle and Sarandon with Thelma. And then Jim turns to me at the end of the story and he goes, so Ryan, that's me. So Ryan Woods, that's still me, full me. So at Ryan Woods Comedy, that's me instead. What do you think of that for a story? And I was like, Jim, you reductive sack of shit. You called me sloppy with the puns and then you've just given me a beat for beat remake of the fucking Crow. The only thing, I got one question. You took Brandon Lee out, why? And he went, well, Susan Sir Brandon Lee writes itself. And I went, that's a fucking stretch. And he went, yeah, but you called me Jim the whole time, you racist prick. I was like, oh shit, yeah, I did. Alright, Jim, you got me. You got me, Jim. Bang to rights. What's your name, man? And he was like, bitch, I am a storytelling, bard, bird, goth. You already know my name. And then I got down on my knees. I was like, oh shit, I do. You're Edgar Allan Crow. Ah! And that's my favourite bit.